Hello, this is the Radical Reviewer taking a look at Why the Rest Hates the West, Understanding the Roots of Global Rage by Miec Pearse, University Press, 2004. The key idea of this text is that Western culture fails to understand and value traditional cultures and instead undermines them. Perhaps the title and especially subtitle and imagery of the book gave me the wrong impression of its contents. This is not an explanation of why the rest hates the West. It's instead an examination of cultural differences that might lead to irritation. The book spends half of its content condemning modern values and showing their incompatibility with traditional values, and the other half is about how industrialization, self-made man, consumerism, dropping birth rates will doom Western culture to vanishing in an immigrant takeover. The solutions given for these problems are a return to a traditional Christian golden age which never really existed. There's little to no look at the West's support of dictators, death squads, bombings, sanctions, neo-imperialism, etc., despite the fact that many terrorist groups cite these things as the main reasons for their hatred of the West. Let's break the book down piece by piece. Pearse admits that foreign policy is selfish and a key reason for people's anger, but then denies economic domination, theft of resources, neo-imperialism in general. For example, Pearse states, "It does, however, seem to me that fashionable Western self-loathing is fundamentally misplaced. Almost always is it directed at the fact of our wealth and power relative to the other peoples of the earth, with the constant quasi-Marxist and false assumption that the wealth must somehow inevitably be stolen from the poor, as if the economic pie were of fixed size and economics a zero-sum game." So the text totally denies banana republics, puppet regimes ensuring access to cheap resources, structural adjustment programs and foreign policy programs that hand infrastructure contracts to US companies, and many other things I could name if given the time. Pearse then goes on to contradict his claim, saying, "It is much more strongly arguable that anti-Westernism, among Muslims at least, is due to Western foreign policy." Some examples are then given. "No one seriously expects any state to pursue anything other than self-interest in foreign policy." But wait, I thought that wealthy countries stealing resources from the poor was a quasi-Marxist false assumption. Yet here you say the anger at the West comes from our foreign policy, and that it can be assumed that all foreign policy is selfish, aka exploitative, aka a more powerful country stealing resources from a less powerful country. Pearse goes on to explain the real reasons why the rest hates the West, and his arguments are interesting. He claims that we in the West see traditional cultures as barbaric because they strictly adhere to bizarre religions and traditions, and they appear stuck in the past, and they're not living in first world opulence. Meanwhile, traditional cultures see Western consumerism, shameless pursuit of wealth and fame, and abandonment of ancestors and traditional values as barbaric. Pearse furthers this argument with a claim I like, arguing that no country can hope to overthrow the massive power of the West, and the only way to become powerful enough to do so is to become as corrupt and hedonistic as the West. After this, though, Pearse starts to lose me. He argues that the Western emphasis on the self-made man has abandoned us to always working from scratch with no traditional or ancestral basis for us to understand who we should be. Much of the arguments here are anachronistic, seeing gender binary, marriage, Christianity as more in line with human experience, while ignoring the world's plethora of societies which have lived countless different ways. Pearse adds to this that careers, leaving the family, education, abortion, women's rights, etc. is causing Western culture not to reproduce, basically laying out the plot of the movie Idiocracy. He claims only a return to traditional Western values, Christianity, will fix it. Immigration is addressed as an uncertain fix to Western population decline. Technology, war, social development, etc. are not considered at all as solutions to this problem. Pearse further pushes the traditional American Christian value solution to our problems, stating, "It is Western amorality that has brought about both the demographic decline and the conflict with traditional cultures. nothing less than a massive cultural reversal is necessary. The quote that sums up the text best is, "Most Westerners are certain that not only is the past a foreign country, but also its ideas were bad ideas." This reminds me of when McCain was asked if Obama is an Arab, and his response was, "No, he's not. He's a decent family man." Because apparently you can't be both? This summarizes Pearse's argument that basically we think of foreign and older cultures as backwards and immoral and refuse to see our own culture having similar faults. Although it's an interesting argument, and I'm sure this cultural conflict causes some irritation, I don't believe that it's the driving force of Western animosity. I think the real reason is the theft of resources, death squads, repressive austerity programs, destruction of autonomy for third world nations, which are the marks of neocolonialism. When answering why the rest hates the West, I expected this book to have a foreign policy explanation, similar to William Blum or Stephen Kinzer's work, or perhaps an economic explanation like John Perkins or Annie Leonard. I was not expecting analysis of cultural incompatibilities and misjudgments. This was certainly an interesting read. If you're interested in radical theory, looking for a book recommendation or whatever, you can get your radical book reviews here with the Radical Reviewer. Thanks for watching.